thinking already about those verses from Mark chapter 8. Jesus had some strong language there, right? Not just an encouragement, but a command. Don't be ashamed of me. So let me ask it in a different way. Would you say that you are secure, that you are confident in your identity as a follower of Jesus? No matter the time, no matter the place, no matter the circumstance, no matter the person or the conversation, are you confident in your identity as a Christian, a follower of Jesus? Or are there times that you struggle with that? We can already tell just from reading those gospel verses that this is going to be a message that challenges us. And we'll have a little intro and then get back to them, right? But a note on the challenging us, right? This is a conversation we maybe don't have often enough. How do you and I live in a world that seems like it is quickly distancing itself from God? A world whose morals seem to change and shift and deteriorate every single day. You and I, how do we have a conversation on, surely you'll understand what I mean by this, falling somewhere in between on the spectrum of obnoxious Christian, forgive my French, right? But I think when I say that, you have an image, right? And that's not what Jesus wants us to be. But then there's the other side of the ditch that I think is just as tempting to fall into, and that is hide, right? Fair weather Christian. Christian when it's convenient. How do you and I work towards and find that middle sweet spot? Humble, yet confident. Bold, and yet peaceable. Loving and caring, and yet also standing on every truth of God's word. That's what Jesus calls you and I to wrestle with today. A few weeks back, I had the opportunity to do chapel at Kenosha Lutheran Academy. So some of our teachers in the room today, you've heard a little bit of this intro here, but I'm going to expand on it for us today. And I got to bring this concept to them. And this is a very scriptural concept. In fact, we're going to see Jesus brings it up, and that's why we're talking about it today. We were talking about different verses when I did chapel, but I brought them this concept, and really it's a concept that the world takes, and it's one of those that even if you take Jesus out of it and take religion out of it, it's kind of a recipe for success in life. And here it is. My identity and my thought processes and my lifestyle are intimately connected. My identity, my thought processes, and my lifestyle are intimately connected. And when those things are in line with one another, when they're in sync with one another, life just makes sense. Right? Life works. It's a recipe, even in a secular sense, and I'll give you an image in just a moment. It's a recipe for success. And I want to challenge us today that Jesus is trying to get us to think in those terms as well. I know so often when it comes time for us to witness or let others know that we're a Christian, we think to ourselves, right, well, I'm not a pastor. I don't know what I'm going to say. I'm not eloquent of speech. I don't know how to respond. So many of these things that run through our heads. Here's where Jesus challenges you and I to focus today. How do I align my identity with my thought processes and my lifestyle? Just to give you a preview, right? When he's speaking with Peter, you do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns, thought processes. Whoever wants to be my disciple, identity, must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me, lifestyle, right? So we're going to get there. First, to give you an example, a concrete example in the world of this, does anybody know who this is? Oh, come on. Does anybody know who this is? This is Novak Djokovic. You guys are killing me. I grew up playing tennis, right? That was my primary sport. Novak Djokovic, right? He's got more muscles in his leg and calf than I have in my entire body, right? But this guy, to talk about this concept in concrete terms, I mean, professional athletes in general, they are probably like the pinnacle of this concept. You want to talk about identity and thought processes and lifestyle having to align, and when they do align, right, life just works. And yeah, professional athletes. Since I'm a tennis guy, I figured to give you a concrete example, I would talk about Novak Djokovic. He has been number one, I think, for longer than anyone. Over the course of the last 13 years, he has been in that number one spot, not for the entire 13 years, but for the vast majority of those 13 years. So he's one of the greats, right? That's his identity. Best tennis player in the world. Let's talk about his thought processes and his lifestyle here, right? Do you think it just happens for professional athletes? Absolutely not, right? I didn't want to memorize his routine, so I put these on the screen here so we can go through them together, right? But he said, I came across a couple articles and did some digging. He said, to be that, to uphold and live that identity, right? It is an entire lifestyle, and tennis is a very mental game. It's a mind thing too, right? It starts with that full night of sleep, so that your mind, so that your body, so that your muscles are rested, rejuvenated, ready to go into the next day and the vigorous exercise that you're going to put it through. Then he starts the day with a tall glass of water. He said, I just went through 8 hours of dehydration, right? And it has to be room temperature, very specific. He said, if it's cold, then all the blood from my muscles goes into my digestive system, and I need them in my muscles for what my body's going to go through that day. And then he takes 2 spoons of honey, right? Natural, healthy sugar to get going. And he does that before breakfast or intense. He's going to start with stretching, with meditation, with yoga, with Tai Chi, right? There's that mental aspect. Tennis, all sports, a very mental game, right? But even life. Life is a very mental thing. And for you and I to be thinking in terms of what of our thought processes today, and Jesus challenges us to. After that, he continues with breakfast, the healthiest breakfast you can imagine. He has a multi-hour session on the court on his non-game days, right? Then he has cool down and stretches, and then he has, I put in parentheses, an insanely healthy lunch, right? Like all the vegetables, all the fruits, all the healthy fats and oils and all that. Then he has a multi-hour gym session in the afternoon, rest, recovery, massage if needed based on what happened that day. And then fitness pod. He gets in this fitness pod. I had never heard of one of these, but it like stimulates muscle recovery and sounded interesting. I don't know if I would do that. But anyways, and then what is for dinner? Meat. Meat is for dinner, right? Steak, chicken, fish, whatever, that protein load. And he said, sometimes I have vegetables alongside all the meat. But he got all those vegetables and minerals earlier in the day, right? Just goes to show, right, this concept. And we see it in the world around us when identity and thought processes and lifestyle align. It's a recipe for something wonderful, for there being a synergy and an energy and life making sense. But when these things are disjointed, when they're out of line, there's issues. We're all sinners here in the room. So we probably have all been through times in life when, and in fact every day as sinners, right? When you feel that. You feel that you know this is my identity, follower of Jesus, Christian, I stand on God's word, and yet when our thought processes are messed up, or when our lifestyle isn't living it, we don't feel right. We feel out of sync, and we can feel the weight of that. We can try and push it off, but it's still there. So let's jump into our verses. Let's jump into the context and see what Jesus has to say. And just hear these words that he challenges us with so we can go home thinking about them this week. So get behind me, Satan, right? Where did that come from? It was to back up even before the verses that we read in Mark chapter 8. Kind of some strong words that he points at one of his own disciples. But here's what happened. First, Jesus asks his disciples, he says, who do people say that I am? And Peter has this beautiful confession. He says, you are the Messiah, the Son of God, right? So he identified Jesus as the promised Messiah. Great confession, Peter. That's awesome, right? That you were able to perceive that and confess that. But then Jesus goes on. He says, okay, so I'm gonna see if my disciples understand. I'm gonna prepare them what it means, the fact that I'm the disciple, because there was a lot of confusion about it in that day and age. In fact, Jesus himself tried not to use that term, Messiah, because it had become such a politically charged term. So he says to them, basically, and this is now we saw it in our verses, since I'm the Messiah, as Peter just said, I'm going to go. And at the hands of the chief priests, the elders, the teachers of the law, the crowds that day, I'm going to die. After 3 days, I'll rise again. And that's when Peter says, no, right? He rebukes Jesus. He goes so far as to rebuke Jesus. So what's going on there, and how does it elicit this response from Jesus? Right, Peter had bought into that day and age. They thought that the Messiah was going to be this political figure, That the Messiah was going to be, to kind of tie it into where we're going for today, this person that came and made life easy. Made life comfortable. This person that was going to come and usher back in an eternal golden age for Israel so that they never would have to deal with any political problems or nations beating up on them ever again. It would be a golden age where they would have comfort, the comfort of heaven on earth, and Peter had bought into it, and so that's why he rebukes Jesus. The Messiah dying is not part of his code. That doesn't make sense with the cultural thought of the day. The Messiah is coming to make life good. So that's where this response from Jesus comes. Get behind me, Satan. I mean, you can certainly see why Jesus would even do that, right? If Jesus were going to entirely derail the reason he came and not go to the cross, that definitely might have sounded tempting. First off, Jesus knew the agony, the pain of the cross that was coming as he suffered for the sin of the world. And so that was certainly a temptation that Satan was throwing out through Peter. The thought, again, you don't have to do this. It's a difficult road ahead. So Jesus attacks it head on, right? He says, get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. To go back to our three things that are intimately tied together, right? Who I am, my identity, what do I think, how do I think, what are my thought processes, and what is my lifestyle? And to pause here, Jesus calls out Peter's thought processes, right? Peter was a follower of Jesus. He was one of those who followed Jesus for his public ministry those 3 years. And yet, right, even we know the disciples, we see them running into it so often. They didn't have it all right in their heads. What about for you and me? Where are our thoughts and our processes out of line? Let's start with these very words from Jesus. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. As you and I think about aligning what's in our minds and what we spend our time and mental energies and capacities thinking about, isn't it so often that this is the problem? That my mind is here, first and foremost. My mind is stuck on what I'm facing, what I'm dealing with, what I'm stressed about, what I can and can't control, to bring in this concept of following Jesus, even if it brings persecution on us. My mind is in that place where I'm focused on what do others think about me, my comfort, me not feeling uncomfortable or stepping out. Jesus is serious with Peter, and he challenges you and I today as well when we go home to think about that, to be in tune with where are my thoughts down here instead of first and foremost with God. Let's continue with this next slide. Whoever wants to be my disciple identity must deny themselves. Pause there. We're dealing here identity, lifestyle, right? Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves. And this is, I've said it several times, a challenging sermon. It was a challenging one for my own heart to think about, to work on. And you know what word I kept getting stuck on? Must. Right? The news of the gospel, forgiveness of sins, it has come to you and I free, but this lifestyle of living as a Christian, it is costly. We only manage to do it by the grace of Him who carries us and strengthens us to do it, right? But to be a disciple of Jesus, part of the gig is that I must deny myself. It's not if I'm feeling like it today, but I must deny myself so that I might better follow Christ, so that I might better love others. I must deny what I want, what I think, what I need. And why is this one? This one's worth getting stuck on for a little bit. As I ponder deny themselves this week, we live in a day and age when it is absolutely foreign, the concept of denying ourselves, right? When, last night, instead of eating 5 Reese's, only eating 4, right? That's not denial. last night only binge watching half a season on Netflix versus the whole season. That's not denial. Last night, putting your phone down at midnight before the usual 2 a.m., it's not denial either, right? It's an important concept for you and I to think through, and I don't want to throw out anything too legalistic here, but for you and I to recognize, right, what is it that we get called by the powers that be in today's world? The powers that be, namely the powers I'm talking about, the people who make the most money in our world. We get called, does anyone know where I'm going with this? Consumers. We get called consumers. What do consumers do if it can be watched or viewed or purchased or eaten? We consume it. We gobble it up, right? Just to ponder that this week. Don't take me as saying you can't ever watch TV or kick back with the family and have a family movie night or anything like that, right? But think about that. That's an identity that you and I have simply because of the culture in which we live and simply because of how we live our lives. Consumers, isn't that the exact opposite, the antithesis of what Jesus is calling you and me to do here? Deny ourselves? As consumers, we take in because I want, I need, I feel, it makes me feel good. And Jesus says, what does it look like to deny yourself? So that you have the time, the energy, the mental and spiritual capacities and bandwidth to follow me and to love others. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. These phrases here are all we're going to have time to get to. Before we start to wrap up, right, we saw Jesus just kind of expands on those things. He says, right, if you're trying to save your life, right, if you're trying to make life all about, gaining and saving and covering your own skin, you're going to lose it. He says, no, whoever loses their life, whoever makes their life about me, about the gospel before everything else, that's what a saved life looks like. And then he goes on to say, right, whoever's ashamed of me, I will be ashamed of. So just kind of reiterating these opening lines, but now to come back to this one and spend a little time dwelling here. Must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. And yes, I would say that I have perceived a disconnect sometimes, right, from pastor standing up here and talking about some of these things, and those of us who come to listen. I've had conversations with many of you as you kind of are, I guess to phrase it, on the front lines of being in a world that wants less and less to do with Jesus and his word and his teaching. So I'm being careful today not to mandate, because I have heard from some of your mouths of the sticky situations you find yourself in sometimes, and it's hard to figure out how to navigate that. So let me, instead of giving specifics today, maybe try and help us reframe some of our thought processes. You and I, right, we're in the wrong frame of mind. Our lifestyle and thought processes are out of whack when you and I have like this radar, right? And we've all felt it as sinners. This radar, and we sense that, there's a potential religious uncomfortable moment coming my way, right? And we can sense it because the conversation turns to politics or religion or whatever it may be, and we don't know all the people there, and it's kind of like we don't even know if there's a cross, right? Difficulty because I'm a follower of Jesus. We don't even know if we're going to bear a cross in that moment, but we're masters in our day and age, right? As we see it coming, we just kind of sidestep entirely so we don't have to deal with it. I'm not dictating or telling you what it looks like in that situation for you, because I know there's so many different situations here in the room. Another way, right, when our thought processes is out of line and we're focusing on human concerns, not the concerns of God, would be when it looks like this. As we see the morals of our society deteriorating around us, as we see them getting further and further away from God's word, we think to ourselves, I have to blend in better. Right? I have to look more and more like the world around me so that nobody knows I'm a Christian. Jesus says to you and I today, right? He challenges us. Think about who you are, how you think, and how you live. And practice lining those things up as you come to my word. And here's where I want to close today, because I know this was a challenging message, and we're going to go home, and I would hope that you go home and you think about it and you evaluate these things. But I want to close with the gospel so that you know where your source of strength is to be real and honest with this conversation and these topics. And it's here. Where is the sweet spot for you and I? Ditch number one being, right, kind of obnoxious, arrogant Christian, and ditch number two being Christian that hides, right, Christian that dodges when it's time to profess and witness to my faith and what Jesus has to say. That sweet spot of being secure, being humble yet confident, being not arrogantly proud, but proud in a wholesome sense. Here's where it comes from. This Christ, the Messiah, who calls you and I to follow him, to be his disciples, he paid it all. Every single sin, the blood that he shed on the cross for you, for the entire world, was all sufficient. And it's come to you as a gift. And that's the sweet spot to live. That's the spot that no matter who I'm conversing with, no matter who I'm witnessing to, no matter what the situation I find myself in, it's not an attack. It's an opportunity for me to figure out how to be a faithful proclaimer of this free love and grace. How to be a faithful servant of this person so that I can share it with them as well. You have permission to follow Jesus.